So as you were told, I'm the naturalist here at French Creek State Park. Some of you may have joined me last year as we talked a little bit about bats and owls and beavers that live here at the park. And of course, I encourage you to come and check out French Creek State Park. We got a great junior ranger program. I'm going to show you a little bit about that later, but we also got an indoor interpretive beehive. So this is something that we just got to be installed this year. So we're super excited for everyone to come out and look at it. The day is not ideal for bees because the bees need UV light to run around the park. So unfortunately, we don't have that UV light today, but it's okay. We'll go over the process. We'll look a little bit into bees. I'll go over the different roles in bees. And if you guys still have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll try my best to answer them. So as you can see, we're going to look inside the hive here. We're going to talk about the numerous roles in the hive. But as you can see, we're outside, right? And we're talking about an indoor beehive. But if we go over here and look, how are the bees going to get outside and inside, right? So right here we have a tunnel, and you can actually see little honeybees going in and out right now. Even though it's a pretty rainy day, there are some bees that are going in and out. They still got work to be done, so you can see that's our hole, and that goes straight into our visitor center. So that's how the bees are able to go in and out of the interpretive beehive. So we're going to go in and check that out. Okay? So we go into the park office here. Going to open up, and right when you walk in is our interpretive beehive. This is what we got here. Okay. So first thing I'm going to ask, so you guys can type in the chat here, how many bees do you think are in this beehive? So let's take another closer look here. It's a little hard to see, there's a glare, but you can see all these bees crawling around in the beehive. Do you have any guesses on how many bees
there were some guesses for 1,000, 5,000, 246, 10,000.
Yes, very good.
I like Alani's guess, 100,000 million.
That's a good guess. We're not quite there. Hopefully, we got about over 1,000 beehives. Good job, you guys, getting that. You guys were around. So yeah, we've got about 1,000. When we first started, we had about 1,000. Right now, we might have 1,500. These bees are constantly laying eggs and creating new bees. So, cultural aspects of bees. Why are they here in America? Why do we have bees? Why are they important? Well, these bees are actually non-native. Now, does anybody know what non-native means? You can stick some of those answers in the chat there. These are non-native bees. What does that mean?
Anyone have any guesses as to what non-native means?
They aren't native to the area, says Alicia.
Yep. Very good. These bees are non-native. So when we think of non-native items like, our spotted lanternflowers that we see everywhere, and other items that we have that we don't like. Normally, non-native means invasive. We don't like invasive, but these are great non-native bees. Bees help pollinate flowers. Bees help pollinate food. If it wasn't for the bees, we wouldn't have a lot of the food that we have now today. So that's why we like these bees. They're more efficient than our native honeybees or our native bees. We have a lot of native bees like the carpenter bee and bumblebee, but these bees, these honeybees, are non-native bees. They actually came over here from Europe. The earliest aspect is from colonial times. They brought them over for a source of honey. That's one way that they could have got food, was honey. So they brought the bees over here in the Jamestown colony, and they actually ended up swarming the area. We'll get into swarms a little later. But yes, these bees are non-native, but we like them here because they are so much more faster at pollinating our flowers than a lot of the other bees.
So a couple things. Jeremiah asked, where's the queen? And we're going to get to that first.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
But
hopefully we can find the queen. It's a rainy day, so all the bees are clumped together. We may not be able to see the queen, but this is more of an incentive for you guys to come out and find the queen yourself. You come in here at any time, look through the hive, look for the queen. I can show you where it is. We can talk a little bit more, but we'll try our best to find the queen today, but that is very good. So that's one of our roles.
You mentioned the bees might have came over as early as like that Jamestown settlement. So there are bees that have been here longer in the States than many of our relatives. Is that right?
Absolutely true. Now, I'm not saying these bees are specifically related to the Jamestown colony bees, but it's important to realize that bees have been an important part of our aspects of Americans in general. So it's really important that we protect these bees, have these bees, and more and more people are having bees. So non-native, right? So a lot of these bees, zoom in here, a lot of these bee species, you can see all the different bee species here on this poster. Ours here are actually a hybrid between an Italian and a Russian. So these two bees got together and made essentially a whole bee family just in this hybrid trait of bee in general. So most of these bees are from Europe and Asia. So none of our native honeybees. We have no native honeybees in North America. But as I said, we do have bumblebees and carpenter bees. So before I go on, do you have any questions about the aspect of bees? If not, we're going to go into some of the bee parts, and we're going to talk about our bee roles, kind of how they work. Okay?
We did have a question just about how long do bees normally live?
Okay, so it all depends. A lot of the worker bees can live a little bit more than 30 days. They can live up to 90 days, maybe even longer. Depends on the hive and how they're doing. Really depends on the hive. The queen bee can live up to 7 years. So we'll get into that a little bit. It's pretty crazy how long she can live. But we'll go over here and look at the different aspects. Okay? This might be a little hard to see, but right here I have a picture of your honeybee, right? So you got your honeybee here, and you can see all the different spots that make the honeybee important. So we'll talk about one. It's long tongue right here. This is called the proboscis. I can't hear you guys, but can you say proboscis? It's a fun word. So this proboscis is really important. That's what sucks all the nectar out of the flowers, okay? So this bee is going to land on a flower, and it's going to suck the nectar out of the flower. Now when it's on that flower, it's going to collect pollen from the back legs. So these bees are extremely hairy. So what they're going to do is they're going to collect that pollen from that flower. And when they go to the next flower, they're actually going to drop that pollen off on that flower. So that's how the pollination happens. So that keyword is called cross-pollination. So that's really important. And that's how the bees work, through cross-pollination. And that's how our flowers are made. And that's how a lot of our food is made too. Another aspect up here is the antenna. The antenna is very important because that helps them communicate with one another, but it also helps them with sensory. So if they're flying around in the area, they're able to sense if it's about to rain, if it's too humid. So the antenna is what helps them navigate. Now, I have a quick question for you guys. Guess how many eyes you think a bee has? How many eyes do you guys think a bee has?
We had, I guess, for 4, 2, 3, 6,
Well, that's a
1,000.
3,
Okay.
1,000,
1,000? Ooh, that'd be a lot of eyes.
33.
Okay, so we got 5 eyes. Now, you may only see 2 here. You got your bigger eyes. That helps with navigation. And it's hard to see, but can you imagine? Think of your 2 eyes. Imagine if your 2 eyes were split into 1,000 different eyes, and they were all hexagon shaped, and you could see millions of different things at once. That's kind of how the bees work, okay? So when you say 1,000 eyes, that's not too far off. It's 2 compound eyes with a bunch of different facets. Then you got your 3 eyes at the top. So the bee has 3 eyes on the top. That helps also with sensory with the antenna, but it also can help detect UV light. So bees can see all the colors we can except for one color. You guys can guess that one color. One color a bee cannot see.
Gideon says yellow.
Yellow, that's a good guess.
Brennan says black.
Okay.
We got
Alicia says
purple,
pink.
red.
Very good. So whoever said red, you were correct. Bees cannot see red. They cannot see the color red. They can recognize the red on flowers, but that's just because they can remember. They cannot see the color red. And that's why colors are so important to bees. On days like this, when it's cloudy, a lot of them are stuck in here. They can't go out because they rely fully on that UV light to go out and be able to find their flowers, okay? So this is pretty much the whole aspect of the bee here, and you got your one more thing, that is the wings here. The wings are obviously important for them to fly, and bee wings can buzz or flap about 200 times per second. So that's 200 times per second. So 1, that's already 200 times a bee has already flapped. Okay? So any questions on the anatomy or makeup of the bee?
That's a good question, and I didn't see who asked it, but you mentioned these bees are not native to the Americas. Well, how did the flowers get pollinated before the bees got here?
Very good question. So we do have our native pollinators. We do have carpenter bees. We do have your bumblebees. So these bees were actually helping pollinate the flowers. But these bees are here because they can pollinate so much more efficiently. They are quicker, they are faster, and they work collectively better. And their hives are bigger. More bees means more pollination that can occur, right? So that's essentially how that happens. Our bees did pollinate, but these bees are faster at pollinating. These bees aren't as efficient at pollinating some of the aspects as our native bees. So our native bees, like bumblebees and carpenter bees, are better at pollinating pumpkins and squash, while these bees are better at pollinating maybe tomatoes or flowers. So it all depends. So you can kind of think of these bees being quicker, faster than one of our native bees would have been. So very good question. Very good question.
There's been lots of questions, guys, and I'm going to try to keep up. Val, I know you're keeping up as well. I did see one about how fast and how long can these honeybees fly?
So these bees can actually fly up to 25 to 30 miles per hour, so very fast, and they can go into a range of about 5 miles. So from here, about most parts of the park you can go to. So if I'm walking around the park, if you come to French Creek, you're hiking around the park, and you see a little honeybee around, probably came from this hive right here. They can go up to 5 miles. So very cool to see that and how they can remember their navigation.
And Alicia wanted to know, how high can they get?
How high can they get? That's a good question. I'm not sure how high they can get. They can probably go pretty high, so probably the tippy tops of the trees, but nothing too crazy. You know, they're not going to go to outer space or anything. But they can go pretty high.
Do all bees have stingers?
So we're going to get into that right now.
All right.
We'll save some of the questions for the end. I will try to get as many as I can. We're going to talk about the roles of bees and kind of how they work in the hive. So we got 3 different roles right here in the beehive. Okay, so if we look at this little diagram here, I know it's pretty small. We can kind of go closer and look at that one too. So these are the 3 different roles we have in the hive. Someone already mentioned the queen. You got your drone bee, and you got your worker bee. So if we look at the hive behind us, we'll see that you see a bunch of bees going around, right? Bunch of bees. These are obviously not all queen bees, right? All these bees are worker bees. I can guarantee that. All of them are worker bees except one, which is obviously the queen, and there might be 1 or 2 drone bees, okay? So we're gonna look at the queen bee first, all right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about the queen bee. So the queen bee is sometimes hard to find because she's identified by having a very long black abdomen. So it's about 2 centimeters longer than most of the other bees, okay? So we've got a long black abdomen here, and what she does is she sticks that black abdomen into one of these holes here, so one of these honeycomb holes. She'll stick that abdomen in the back, and that's how she'll lay the eggs, right? So the queen bee is identified by that long abdomen, and a lot of the times, we don't have it yet, but a lot of times we'll stick a queen bee in here, okay? We'll stick her in here, and we'll put this and shove her up to the top, and we can put a little paint mark on top. So that way we can easily identify her. So that yellow dot will help easily identify the queen. Now the queen's whole function is just to lay eggs. That's her main goal. It's just to lay eggs. She doesn't have to do anything else. She doesn't have to go get food. She doesn't have to go and pollinate flowers. She has nothing to do. Her main thing is to keep making bees and to keep reproducing the hive. That's her main goal. So the queen, she'll hang out all day. You'll see little queen attendants around her, feeding her, grooming her. She doesn't do anything. She has everyone that feeds her herself. Wouldn't that be nice if you had someone, a friend that just constantly came up to you and fed you constantly? You don't have to do anything but hang out, lay eggs, and feed constantly. So a lot of the times, the queen is the sole aspect. She's the core of the hive. Now, what happens if the queen dies? Any guesses? What happens if the queen dies?
Hey, so any guesses on that? And I see a lot of you are putting in facts that you know and other questions, things like that. That's great. We're going to go over that at the end too. There is totally fine. Someone mentioned that another queen will take its place.
So yeah, that's essentially what's going to happen. So there's 3 ways that these bees are going to create a new queen, okay?
By the way, whoever said that the workers will find a new home and just put out their job applications, you're great.
Hey, you're kind of close on that aspect. We'll talk about that right now. So 3 ways that they can make a new queen. So 1, the queen dies. Queen dies, we got to make a new queen, right? So what these worker bees are going to do, as that queen lays the eggs in the cells, the worker bees will be like, okay, so say the queen laid the eggs in the cells, the queen dies. These worker bees are going to start solely feeding one of these larvae something called royal jelly. Royal jelly is exclusively what the queen eats. The queen only eats royal jelly. No one eats royal jelly except the larva and the queen. So they're going to start feeding one of these larvae royal jelly, and she'll essentially form into the queen. Queen cell looks like a peanut-shaped cell. So they'll create this queen, and she'll emerge. So, oh, easy enough. Queen dies, new queen is made. Okay, but there's something else that can happen. We talked about swarming earlier. So if the bees decide to swarm, that means that your bee colony is doing so good. So if this colony is doing so good, they're over and reach capacity. So the bees can't sustain this colony. So they will leave. Some of the bees will leave. Sometimes the queen will leave with the bees. And now this hive has no queen. So then they got to make that queen cell again. One more reason that they'll make a new queen is if her pheromones. So I talked a little about the queen attendants, how they're feeding her and constantly grooming her. These queen attendants are important because they're actually spreading this thing called pheromone, which is her scent around the hive. If the queen is a low pheromone, they got to make a new queen. So we'll make a new queen. So let's think, making that new queen cell, okay? But that queen with low pheromone is still there, right? It's still her house. She's still living in the hive. But this new queen's going to emerge. She's going to be born. Now there's 2 queens in the hive. You can't have 2 queens in the hive. So what's going to happen is they're going to take their stingers out and they're going to fight. And whichever queen comes out victorious is going to take over the hive, okay? So someone asked about the queen and the stinger. Yes, the queen has a stinger. And she can constantly sting, too, with that stinger. All the other worker bees have barbed stingers. Okay, so their stinger's going to look like this. The queen's going to look like this, right? The barbed stinger, if it stings, it's going to rip out, and that worker bee will unfortunately die. But not with the queen. The queen can sting as long as she wants, and that's in order for her to battle with the other queen. And then we got a new queen in the hive, just like that.
So I'm seeing a lot of questions. Like I said, we're going to get to all of them, but one that I have seen several times, or actually two of them I'm going to ask you, Jared.
Mm-hmm.
One, when do bees, worker bees or queen bees, decide that it is time to sting?
When it's time to what?
When it's time to sting, when they're going to use their sting.
Oh, when they're under threat. So the queen, normally the queen will sting us. If we're in the hive, doing something, and I'll go over the process of how we take care of honey. So we'll get to that at the end. But a lot of the times the queen's not going to sting. They know when to sting when they're in danger. So the worker bees are only going to sting you if you are showing fear. So that's the only way they'll sting you. Most of the time I actually see beekeepers. Now, can you imagine this, reaching your hand in the hive and picking up a whole ball of bees, having them crawl all around your arm, and none of them will sting you? I've seen many beekeepers do that. And that'll happen because they don't have any fear. They're not scared of the bees. The bees can sense your fear, and that's when they'll most likely sting you. Or if they're under threat, if they feel like they're being kind of constantly shoved together, or there's too many of them, and you're kind of irritating them, tapping them on the glass, they may sting you. So most of the time they won't sting you. These bees are very docile. They're not going to hurt you unless you're trying to hurt them. They're different than wasps, which brings me to this point. Wasps and honeybees, we got a difference here, okay? Now, a lot of times we assume wasps and honeybees are the same thing. Wasps are completely different. They're both kind of related to ants, but honeybees, remember, have that hairy fur with help collect pollen. Wasps do not. Wasps are more predators, so they'll go after other bugs or other insects and kind of eat them, versus bees are pretty much just pollinating and eating their own bee bread and honey. So the wasps are more predators. The honeybees are more for pollinating, and they're a lot more better at pollinating as well. So yeah.
And I mean, I saw a bunch of questions because there's questions about the difference between wasps and bees, and also hornets, and are there murder bees just like there's murder hornets? But the one thing that I did want to bring up, a lot of people have asked, what is the bee's main predator, and is it us?
So bees have a lot of predators. Birds are getting bees, but a lot of times it's going to be us. Bee population is going to decrease because of pesticide use. We're starting to spray our weeds. It's summertime. We don't want these weeds. Grandma's coming over. Got to make the place look nice. We're spraying for the bees. So a lot of the times that's going to hurt our bee population, because sometimes that spray will get on the flower. And what happens if that bee goes on a flower? They're going to use that proboscis and suck out the sap or the nectar of the flower, right? And in that flower is those hard chemicals. And they're going to suck those in and bring that back to the hive. So now they have those chemicals inside them, and they're going to transfer that around the hive. So yes, part of it is us. We're a huge predator when it comes to bees.
And by the way, guys, I know I've seen a few questions about where exactly we are as far as French Creek Park and how you guys can come visit. We're going to go over that at the end too, because we want anybody who can to come out here. I promise you, this is a very small portion of a huge park.
Absolutely. You got it. So we talked about the queen, right? So we're going to go on to our next role. Next role is going to be the quickest role, and that's the drone bee. The drone bee. So I saw one drone bee in the hive. It's going to be hard for me to point him out because you might not be able to see. The drone bee is the only male bees in the only male bees in the hive. And their only goal is to mate with the queen. That's their only job. They're lazy. Think of the drone bees like being the lazy couch potato. They're going to mate with the queen. They don't got anything else to do. They're not going to go out and look for flowers. They're not going to go out and get any nectar. They're not doing it. They're going to hang out in the hive. When they're done mating with the queen, they're going to eat all the honey that all the worker bees bring back until they die. So they're lazy. They don't do a whole lot. They don't even have a stinger. So they can't even sting you. They got big eyes and big butts. That's how you can remember those drone bees. And they're just a lazy couch. Okay?
Now, someone mentioned the drone bees look kind of big. Are they just like the bullies of the beehive? Is that the way they work?
I wouldn't say they're bullies, but they're definitely looking for a free lunch all the time. They might butt some of the other bees out of the way in order to get over there and start eating some of the honey or pollen. But I wouldn't necessarily call them bullies. They're too lazy for all that. They're just hanging out. They just want to.
And worker bees can be male and female, right?
Nope, worker bees are all female. All female bees are worker bees. Only male bees are drones. That is it. So we're constantly making worker bees because all the worker bees are doing all the work. We're going to talk about the worker bees. Okay?
I think you just upset all the women in the
No, yeah, but that's what we call them. They are all the female bees do everything. They're the sole aspect of what's keeping this hive alive is those female bees. That is it. Female bees do all the work. And what they do is they go out and they're going to be the ones that collect honey. So or collect pollen. Now, all of the worker bees have so many different roles within. They are so unique that they have so many different roles. We have the queen's attendant, which I talked about. A lot of you can remember that. Remember, they're going to be feeding the queen. They're going to be cleaning up the queen. We got fanning bees. These fanning bees are ones that fan honey to cool it down to get a water content. We'll talk about that a little bit. You got your mortuary bees. These are the bees, bees die, so these are the bees that are going to clean out the bees hive. This helps stop spread disease and helps keep the hive nice and clean. Another bee is our most important one, which is the foraging. So these female bees are going to go out, they're going to use their proboscis to suck out the nectar, and they're going to fill up their stomach and come back. Now, what do you think these bees do when they come back when their stomach is full of nectar? What do you guys think is going to happen?
Any guesses? Spit it out? Give it to the queen?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So these bees are going to throw this up into another bee's mouth. Okay, coming back, this person's waiting, or this bee's waiting for this bee to come back. This bee's going to throw up in their mouth all that nectar. They're going to suck it in, and they're going to throw it into one of these cells, okay? So we're going to throw up in one of these cells, and that's when that fanning bee comes and fans that down, and they have to reduce the water content to 17%. Then it'll be capped, so I'm not sure you'll be able to see that it's in the hive. We'll see if we can get as close as we can. Some of these cells, so if you maybe down here, some of these cells are going to be capped. So if you look inside, you actually see a shiny substance, and that's essentially what the bees are bringing back, and they're going to fan it down. That bee actually over by itself right here is probably fanning bee. She's just taking a break right now. She's going to fan it down, and they'll essentially cap them eventually. Okay, so that foraging bee will come back, give it to the fanning bee. Fanning bee's fan it down, and then they'll cap it for honey. Okay, simple enough, right? Now the other aspect here, the other thing that's capped over here, you might be able to see right here. There's a little hole, so you might be able to see all those caps right there. So if you look in between the bees there, you can see the yellow caps. Those are actually all going to be baby bees. So all inside, even if you look in, you might be able to see, if you look in, you can actually see some circular larvae, and that's what they're doing. So a lot of these bees' butts are sticking out. They're actually in there feeding the bees. So these are all going to be younger bees. So half of this hive is capped pollen. Half of this hive is capped brood, is what we call it. Brood is the baby bees, okay? So now that we know what the worker bee does, do we have any questions?
Any questions about worker bees, y'all? I'm not seeing. Do they rest at all?
Do they rest? Yes, they rest. And days like this is the perfect day. Cloudy days where they can't use their UV to navigate. So these cloudy days is the resting day. But also a good day, so come over here and look. Also a good day to start creating home. So obviously, all this is created here. So if we look in here, right up here, you can see how it's still white over here, right? So they will go and they'll start creating this. So this whole slide was all white and there was no honeycomb on it. They're creating this honeycomb right now. All these bees hanging out, sitting still, they're creating honeycomb. And they can make that honeycomb because they secrete something out of their head that helps create this honeycomb. And all this honeycomb is in a hexagon formation. It all has 6 sides, all hexagon, because that is the most efficient way to store honey. And that's what they want to do, store honey and pollen, right? That's the ideal. That's what they want to do.
Now, we've had a lot of questions too, and I know we'll probably get to it a little later, but one of the big questions was, why are some people allergic to bees and others aren't?
That's a great question. I wish I totally knew the answer to that, but some people are just allergic to certain things. Everyone's allergic to something differently. And unfortunately, some people are allergic to bees. So that's just unfortunate. I'm not sure on the science, but I definitely know quite a few people.
All right.
Okay, so communication. So how do these bees communicate? Probably ever think about that a little bit. What if that foraging bee comes back and she's like, wow, that's a great flower. You guys gotta go check this out. You gotta go back there and fill up your stomach. So if you look right here, this is how the bees communicate. They do a waggle dance. So what they do is they'll go straight up. They'll shake their butts to the right, shake their butts to the left, and this tells the other bees which direction to go. It's hard to imagine, but this whole hive vibrates. So they can all vibrate and communicate with each other through these vibrations in the hive. And if these bees are waggling, they're telling where the other bees can go. So they'll go in the direction of the sun, either turn right or left, and this is the navigation for the bees. So I'll look in here and see if any of the bees are waggling. It looks like we got a few that might be shaking their butts a little bit, trying to tell the other bees where to go. But yeah, they are ready to go. It's obviously going to be more important when it's sunny out. So it's not as sunny right now, so they're not going to be waggling. Remember, this is for their rest day when they're creating honeycombs and kind of the slides. So yeah, this is very important.
So that's their version of Yelp.
Yes, exactly. You got it. That's exactly how they communicate. And that's the easiest way for them to communicate in general. Because they can't speak, right? They can't talk. They have a different form of communication. That's how they communicate with one another. Shaking their butts and waggling.
So you mentioned earlier, and I've seen a couple questions about this, that if a queen bee leaves, they decide to feed another bee larvae royal jelly to make that the new queen bee.
Yeah.
How do they decide which bee gets the royal jelly?
It's random. It's hard to believe, but they're actually chosen random. So they're not really picking favorites, but I think it's the quickest way in order to make sure that they have new queen. So if they realize the queen's gone, they're going to pick a random larvae. They're going to communicate to one another. All right, I'm starting to feed this larvae royal jelly constantly. So that's the important part. We're not 100% sure as humans science with queen bees. They have a whole new science that it's hard for us to imagine what they do and how they communicate. But they just randomly pick a larva. They may be a reason within the bee community, but that's something that we don't. They randomly pick one at random and will start feeding this royal jelly. And remember, the queen's the only one that eats the royal jelly. Larvae eat some when they're younger, but the queen is the only one that gets the royal jelly.
And someone asks, is there such a thing as like a king bee? Like obviously we don't have the name king bee, but is there like maybe a particular bee that would maybe work harder than the other bees? Now, granted, you just mentioned worker bees are all female, so they wouldn't be kings, but is there a certain setup where certain bees work harder than other bees that would all be worker bees?
Not necessarily. There's no really king bee. I mean, I think we need to understand like the importance of the roles. Now, remember, there's probably about 8 to 9 different roles that bees have, maybe even more. I only went over a few. I'm going to vanity bee, queen and board bee. We got nurse bees, that are feeding the other bees. So you have to understand that all these bees work collectively, and not one role is more important than the other. If that mortuary bee, the ones that clean all the dead bees, didn't use their role anymore, there'd be a lot of dead bees in the hive. That'd probably spread disease. If the nurse bees weren't feeding the new bees, there probably would be new bees. If the foraging bees weren't going out to get nectar and pollen, we wouldn't be able to pollinate flowers. We wouldn't be able to give any nectar or honey. So it's really important to see that not one role is better than the other. They all work collectively, and they all have an important job.
And I know some of you guys came in late, so you're coming in, and it looks like that we just stuffed a bunch of bees into a window here. So just to let you know, if you look here, that's actually kind of like a giant doorway, and it goes outside. See them in there. You can see some bees in there that are just hanging out in the hallway, checking their mail. But they can go out through that window there, and that's how they go in and out.
Now, another role that's important down there is actually guard bees. So guard bees. So what if a fly comes in? What if a spider comes in? Those guard bees stop that. So that's another role. Some of those worker bees are guard bees. They just hang out at the entrance, don't let anything else in. So you got to have a secret code in order to get in this.
See, Alani said something about spiders way when we first started, and you didn't think we were going to bring spiders up. There you go.
No spiders allowed in these hives. No spiders allowed. So if you guys have any questions about the roles or anything else, I'm going to show you how honey is. Okay?
All right. Now, someone did want to know there has been some questions about ants. And do ants and bees get along? Do they not care about each other?
So they both have different tasks, right? The bees they're busy bees. Heard the name busy bee before. These are busy bees. They're constantly working. They don't have days off. A day like this may be more of a relaxing day, but if you come here on a sunny summer day, they'd be flying in and out of this tunnel constantly. Now, I have seen some ants roll around here before, but I don't see any here right now. The ants and the bees, they don't mind each other. Each of them are doing their own thing. The ants are probably there to, eat up some of the dead bees that are thrown out into the tunnel, and that's kind of how they work together. So that symbiotic relationship, if some of you remember that from last year when I talked about it, that means two different entities working together and benefiting each other. So you can kind of think of ants as being a symbiotic relationship with the bees only because they're going to be taking some of those dead bees out and eating them in general. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so 2 other quick questions before we get into the honey, and we're going to have a ton of other questions at the end.
That's fine. I love questions.
But 1, bees are constantly working. Do they sleep and for how long?
They do sleep, and it's hard for us. We can't hold the science. Remember, these are only science that we've always been studying and constantly studying. Bees do sleep, but we're not really sure for how long, and we don't really know when. You know, they don't have eyelids like us. We don't see when the bee's eyes close in bed, but we do know that they sleep at some point. Every animal, every insect needs rest at some point, and we do know the bees sleep. I mean, some of them are resting right now. Some of these that are making that honeycomb, you know, they're resting right now. But to have a full good night's sleep, they're not going to be sleeping anywhere for 8 hours. You have to understand in the wintertime, bees are mostly going to sleep. They're not coming out in the wintertime. In the wintertime, they're stuck in their hive, and that's why they are so busy at this time of the year. They got to make sure they got enough honey, enough pollen, enough nectar to sustain them through the winter, right? So a lot of people that have these beehives realize that it gets too cold, and some of the bees actually do die off. So some people's hives can actually die off because these bees don't have enough food or it gets too cold. So it's really, really a gamble when you have bees and you're trying to get through the winter. Because you don't ever want to take the top off your little beehive. You don't ever want to look in there because they're doing their thing and you hope that they survive.
So essentially they're somewhat hibernating. Is that
Yeah,
right?
they're essentially hibernating throughout the winter. They're still working in there. They're still
And by the way, I'm assuming bees don't use their stingers as like swords. They don't have like competitions.
No, we're not. They don't do any fencing or anything. The only time that would happen is if the queens are fighting each other, right? Remember when I talked about the queen stinger? That's the only time. They're really not going to fight. The queens will definitely fight.
And bees, are they born with wings or do they grow?
Yep, so they're going to essentially grow. So I wish you could zoom in. There's another reason for you guys to come check this out. If you look really, really closely in one of the circles here in the hive, I don't know if I can see any right now. They're actually circular larvae, and that larva keeps growing and growing. And actually, I'll show you guys. Come over here. We'll look at the life cycle of bees on this poster. Perfect.
Oh, right.
So remember, the queen's laying eggs. The queen, how many eggs do you think the queen can lay in her lifetime? Let's have some guesses here. How many eggs can a queen lay in her lifetime? Got some good guesses earlier.
50, 50,000, 10.
And 100.
Okay, so remember how we said that the queen can live up to 7 years. A lot of times live to 3 to 5 years. A queen can lay 1 million eggs in her lifetime. 1 million. So that's 1 million bees. One queen can make in her life. 1 million. So that's very important to realize that this queen is always busy. She's always laying eggs. That's why it's hard to find her sometimes, especially today. When all these bees are close together and all doing their own thing, this queen is going to every cell. Like I said, she's going to every cell and putting her abdomen, which is the back fur, inside one of these little cells. Okay? And that's how she's going to be laying eggs. But she has to make sure they're clean. She's very particular. They have to be clean in order for her to lay her eggs. And of course, that's one of the bee's jobs, is to go in there and clean that. Okay.
And by the way, I've seen some questions. We did Play-Doh yesterday. We're not using the Play-Doh or the clay today. That's just for you guys, just to use whenever you want. So
maybe you can make a Play-Doh bee out of your Play-Doh, right?
yeah, or if you want to make a Play-Doh beehive, that's kind of cool.
Show them what that looks like. So, queen's laying the eggs, right? Here we go. Day 4, egg hatches, larva, appears, worker, feeds. So look, that's that nurse bee I'm talking about. We're feeding the larva here, okay? Then it becomes a pupa. Okay, so now it's big enough. Still no wings yet, right? And that bee, after 10 days, is going to be capped. We're going to cap it just like a little cocoon. Think about it as a butterfly. We're capping it, and it's going to be in there for about 10 or 12 more days. That's when we're going to grow the wings. That's when we're going to emerge. The adult's going to chew through that cap that I showed you. Remember, we got caps for honey. We got caps for baby bees. They're coming out. Cleaners come in. We're going to clean out that again. That most likely means the queen's going to lay in there again, okay? So clean it out. After day 22, the queen's going to lay in there again. And then we got feeding and tending again. That's what we got to do. And then we got to move all of those different roles. So here you can see all the different roles that they go in. And that's kind of how that happens. The roles are kind of randomly selected. A lot of them are pre-selected. The queen kind of knows what she's laying, which is very impressive. The queen knows if she's going to lay some more worker bees. She knows when she needs to lay drone bees too. So very important to realize that. There's some fun facts over here too that I want to show you guys before we get into the process of honey. Now think about this. 80% of food is pollinated by honeybees. We wouldn't have as much food as we do today if it was not for the honeybees, okay? So they ascend the essential nutrients to sustain life. Is very important that we have this honey. You can see it can make 20 to 60 pounds of honey per year. So symbiotic relationship, right? We talked about that. Us and honey, they make honey for us. We give them a home. We take care of them. We make sure that they're safe, that they're good, the hive's good, they're clean, they're happy. That's what we do. And in order for that, we get honey. All right? Symbiotic relationship. that's what we want. And even here it says 1 million eggs in a lifetime for that queen, okay? So very, very cool. Any more questions right now before we get to the honey making?
You know what? Let's get into the honey making, and then I know a lot of you have asked questions. Val, I know you can keep a track of them too. We'll ask all the questions at the end.
We got it. We'll definitely do that. So this is not what a normal hive looks like. This is an interpretive observation hive. Remember how many bees are separated? A little over 1,000. A normal beehive is going to have 40,000 bees in a beehive. Beehives are square boxes. I don't have one to show you, but they're square white boxes. Inside these hives, there are these little slides that we have here. So the slides here are actually going up and down, going vertical. So that way we can slide. So I can take this off if I wanted. I can remove this, and I can take this slide out, okay? So this is essentially how this works. But in a beehive, they are like this, in rows, okay? So if I'm a beekeeper, got my bee suit, don't have a bee suit with me right now, sorry. Maybe I can show you that eventually. Don't have a bee suit, put on my bee suit, okay, we're gonna go in and start getting some honey, right? So remember that foraging bee comes back, throws it up in another mouth, they throw it up into a cell, that fanning bee fans it, and has to get a water content, 17%, it's capped, honey's good to go, right? So I'm gonna pull out a slide. Actually, first, I'm gonna use this. Anybody know what this is? Looks kind of weird, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take off the top, we're gonna get some holes, we're gonna put them in here. This is a smoker.
Oh, good answer, guys.
Do this, we're gonna smoke the bees. We don't 100% know why the smoke comes to bees. We think it's more of a defense mechanism for bees because I think it's a fire. So they think it's a fire, they feel like they need to calm down and sustain their energy. So we're gonna smoke the bees. All right, smoke now. This calms them down. You smoke the bees, now I can take the slide. Slide comes out. Now imagine all of these are capped. You wanna touch this, see what they feel like. So that's all honeycomb there. It feels really cool. It's kind of gushy. All made by bees there, so very cool.
It almost feels like a grate on a grill.
Yep, and this part right here, you can actually see pollen. So that's some pollen that they were storing. Bees will eat the pollen eventually. But yeah, so all capped. Imagine these are all capped. I'm gonna take this thing. This is called a hive tool. Take the hive tool. I'm gonna chop the caps off of this honey, or off of this slide. All the honey is gonna rush out. Okay, all the honey is gonna rush out, and we catch it in the jar. Corner, it all rushes out. Before that, I forgot to mention we're gonna wipe the bees off. Okay, the bees are all gonna be on this slide, so we're gonna wipe them off before we uncap the honey. A lot of people will take their bare hand and do it because the bees won't sting them. So we'll brush them off. Then we'll use the hive to chop it off. All the honey comes out. We're gonna put it into a jar, and then boom, you got honey. We're gonna eat some honey. You guys like honey? I like honey.
Now, are the honeycombs edible as well?
Honeycombs are edible. Yes, they're edible, but normally they're more waxy. We're not really gonna eat them. That's more of a wax that bees are kind of making. We don't necessarily want to eat those. We want to be eating them. But you can eat the comb, of course. You can absolutely eat them.
Honey goes in tea. The honeycomb might go into like something like chapstick.
So one more thing I'm going to talk about, and that is this little item right here. So if we want to, so for example, when we installed this, we had to bring the queen in, right? You got to bring the queen in to the top. So the only way to bring the queen is we're going to put her in this little container. Put the queen in there with 3 queen attendants so they can still feed her and look after her. We'll take it, we'll close it, and we'll take her to a new hive. So that's essentially what we did. We took a few different hives here, mushed them together just to get them used to and to get genetic diversity, right? So we got about 3 different hives in here. When they first came in, they were all freaking out. They didn't know what was going on. Who's this bee? Who's that bee? We're not sure what's going on. They calmed down after a while, and then essentially the queen helped calm them down. The hive got calm, and now we are good to go. So we transport the queen bee in this little container here. It's important that we have those queen attendants with her because the queen needs someone to constantly attend her, right? Cleaning her, feeding her constantly. So just a short distance from the hive down to the visitor center to transport the queen. Okay? That's pretty much what I got with you guys with when it comes to the terms and roles of bees, how our hive works, how the honey works, and now, of course, if you guys have any questions, please.
So Val, I know you've been paying attention to a lot of questions. Can you just look through what some of the questions are? But I'll start with one that I saw, which was someone asked, do you name the bees? Like, do you have a particular bee that's named Beatrice and one that's named Beyonce? Or, you know?
That would be awesome. Now, anyone can name the bees. You can come here and name any bee. It's hard for us to keep track. Queen bee doesn't have a name right now. She doesn't have a name, of course, but I can't keep track of all these bees. There's over 1,000 bees in there. I wouldn't be able to know which one's Beyonce, which one's Fergie. I won't be able to know. I won't be able to know. But it'd be nice if they all had individual names and I could remember all of them and know them. But some of these bees were actually just born not too long ago. So, you know, some of these are baby bees, some of these are older bees. So it's hard for us to keep track of which bee is which. And even the queen in general, like right now, I can't even be close to finding the queen because it's crowded by all the different bees going on. So, very good question.
All right, Val, I will turn it over to you to ask some questions.
Okay, there was a lot in the chat, so if I missed anybody, feel free to write it again because this chat has been going wild. But
and I will say, Jared's going to be back for 2 other things we're doing too. So if we don't get to your question, you can have your mom or dad email me. Jared is always happy to educate you guys on everything. We'll be able to answer them for you if we don't answer them today, okay?
Do wasps get along with bees?
So that's a good question. A lot of the times they don't really interact. I mean, I wouldn't say they get along, but they're doing their own thing. Remember how we talked about the ants and the bees? They're kind of just doing their own thing. Wasps don't really want to mess with bees. Bees don't really want to mess with the wasps. They're in different areas. You know, wasps kind of make like a paper type hive. These bees are going to be more in type of things, like in tree holes, in hives. So it's really different aspects of how they live. So, no, they don't really mess with each other. Good question.
All right, thank you. Another question was, can bees jump? I feel like I know the answer, but
bees do not jump. No, they take off with their wings. They have no need to jump, but that'd be kind of crazy if they could jump and fly. But I have not seen a bee jump.
And you mentioned that these particular bees can get up to 35 miles per hour. That's how fast they can go, right?
Oh, yeah.
Flying.
Remember, and flap their wings 200 times a second. So pretty crazy.
okay, we had some questions about honey. One was, do bees only eat honey? And can honey be kept in the fridge?
So,
what do bees eat? Do bees only eat honey? Is that what they mainly eat?
Bees are going to be eating honey, of course. So when we're talking about taking honey, we're only going to be taking honey out of those big hives for 40,000 bees. We're not going to go in here. This is the bees' food. Since there's only about 1,000, 2,000 in here, we're not going to be taking the honey. They're going to be eating it themselves. They're storing it for the winter. They're storing it for whenever, and they're going to eat it themselves. But they also eat the pollen. If you could zoom in closer, it'd be nice to show you some pollen that's in here. You can see it's very glossy here. This is going to be the start of some honey that they're making. But I can't really see any pollen cells right now. But it's really cool if you look in because you'll actually see the different colors. You'll see tree pollen, you'll see flower pollen, and they'll actually be different colors. So that's something that they're going to store too. And that's something that they're going to be feeding all their other bees. So see here, the bee's shaking. This bee's communicating over here. I don't know if you guys can see it. See it right there. He's shaking. See him shaking like crazy. He's dancing. He's talking to all the bees, telling him a good source of food he found when he came out. She came out. So it's very important to see that this is a way for them to communicate.
And you mentioned before that ants and bees kind of get along. They help each other out in the sense of, you know, ants might deal in with getting rid of some of the dead bees and stuff. Is there any other animals that bees kind of benefit from and that work together?
I'm sure there is. There's not anything that I can necessarily think of right now, but us, of course, everyone. Honey, we get honey from them, right? We're benefiting. You see the bear, you see Smokey Bear over there. Smokey Bear's gonna go in there and he's gonna get some honey too. You know, he's benefiting from the bees. So we benefit solely through honey. You know, and trying to keep them alive and stopping that pesticide use I was talking about, stopping all that stuff, so we can keep the bees living. A lot of different animals benefit from the bees, especially us, especially bears, animals.
Alrighty, let's just see. There was another one about if they can they bite or if they can just sting? Can they only sting?
These normally wouldn't bite. They do have mandibles. Mandibles are what their mouths are. They're very small, so they're mostly not going to bite. These mandibles kind of just help them create that wax used for honeycomb. So that's one way that they can do it, and it helps them chew out of those cells. Remember, when they're younger and they're in that cocoon cap cell, they're going to use those to chew out, but normally they don't bite.
Now, I see something here about, you know, people are asking me like, hey, do bees, you mentioned about how they vomit food and things like that. Like, do bees normally like pee and poop like us?
Of course. And the queen constantly is too. Of course the queen's going to be, and that's what the queen attendant's going to do. She's cleaning up all that poop and bees do, and they do. but there's of course a roll that helps clean them out and make the hive cleanly. You know, you're not going to be able to see it; it's going to be so small, but yes, they do. And there's of course a bee and a few bees that are going to go around be cleaning out the hives, so we don't have a buildup of anything.
And how do they go about cleaning it? Like they obviously don't just go to
Their
the store.
That's what they use those mouths for. Just to clean, eat it, and then regurgitate.
Oh, there you go. So they're not buying mops and brooms.
No mops.
Any other questions you saw, Val? We're going to wrap this up, and I want Jared to tell us a little bit about French Creek Parks. That way you guys can come out too. But so maybe about 2 more questions, Val.
Okay. Are most bumblebees female like honeybees?
Are bumblebees the same as honeybees in the sense that all the worker bees are female?
Yeah, that's essentially mostly how it works with most of our bees. Same with our native bees as well, like those bumblebees. So yeah, bumblebees, carpet bees, most of the time. To my knowledge, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure that's exactly how it works. Same structure.
Yep. And just one more. How do bees get their honey?
So bees when the bees get their honey, it's just what they're producing, correct?
Yep. So remember when they go, they fill up that stomach, right? All that nectar. That nectar comes back. They're passing it along to one another. They're putting in one of these cells, you know, and then they're going to fan it. Remember, they have those fanning bees that fan that down. You got to get that water content to 17%. It's not a lot of water in honey. So 17% of that honey is water. So that's what makes it sticky. So that's exactly what we're doing.
And I will say, guys, some of you are asking questions that were already answered, which is 100% fine. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this recording. I'm going to put it up on our YouTube page in a couple of days. I'll share it on Facebook, things like that too. So you are more than welcome to rewatch it. And as I mentioned, if you have questions that we didn't answer, next time we're here with Jared, we'll talk about it as well. I guess we got time for one more, if there's one more, Val, that you want to put out there.
I'm just seeing here.
And we had over 70 people here, so there's been a lot of stuff. So yeah.
Does a hive start with 1 bee?
Yeah, so does a hive start with 1 bee, or there are like 100 bees that get together and say, we're going to have a hive right here?
That's a great question. So hives are going to happen because swarming. Remember we talked about swarming. Our hive's too big. We got to create a new hive. It all starts with the queen. They create a new queen. That queen can decide to leave if she wants. She take the hive, and they'll split the hive. Hive that's left needs to make a new. So it's essentially split. When it comes to our hive, so starting up this new hive, we put those brood cells. We put a queen in. We put a few worker bees in. Then we got those brood cells, right? Those capped ones. Remember, not the ones that are capped with honey, the ones that are capped with brood. All the larvae that are in here, we're going to put those in here in those slides. They're going to hatch, and that's what helps create that hive. So the starting foundation, if you're creating a hive, is normally queen, few worker bees, and then some drones. Of course, the queen's got to mate. She's got to be fertile, and she's got to be able to make those eggs. So that's essentially what we're going to start. Is mostly queen, drone bees, and a few workers.
Awesome. This has been like really a lot of fun. Real quick, if people want to come to French Creek, tell them exactly where you guys are located and your hours, things like that.
So we're located in Elverson, outside of Birdsboro. Here in Berks County, we actually have Berks County and Chester County. You can find us by looking up online, French Creek State Park. We actually have a DC North Calendar of events where we do a lot of fun programming. We do a lot of bee stuff. We do a lot of hikes. We do a lot of kayaking stuff. So everyone is welcome to come out here this summer and join us. If you want to look up at French Creek State Park, easy to find on the internet. Just talk to your mom and dad. You can Google us, and you'll get directions to be able to find us. We actually have a junior ranger program too that we actually just started last year. And if you come here, you can come here anytime this summer. We have a little booklet here, so you can go around the park. You fill out the booklet. Very simple. You'll start here in the visitor center, fill out the booklet, go down to the lake, fill out some stuff there. And when you're done, you get to be sworn as a junior ranger. You get a junior ranger badge right here, a nice shiny gold badge, and you get a nice certificate you can take home too. So these are 2 opportunities you can come, check out the park, do our junior ranger program, check out what we got here. You can come and join us and we have a good time. And
you guys are open up 7 days? So
sorry about that. Yes, we're open. We're open actually all the time here in the office, 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, 10 to 3 Saturday, Sunday. But if you want to see events that are going on, remember DCNR, just like a patch here, DCNR calendar of events has all kinds of stuff that we're doing here, and that will be continuing throughout the summer.
And to give you guys an idea, it's a little over an hour outside of Philadelphia, a little over an hour outside of Allentown. So if in that eastern part of the state. We're not that far from Harrisburg either, if you want to make the trip, because there's so much to do here as well.